This is The Week on WURD, a podcast featuring a roundup of the most interesting, informative, and entertaining interviews from WURD Radio. You can listen to WURD Radio anytime, anywhere on WURDradio.com and the WURD Radio app. Give us a play and download it today. In this episode, Evening Words with Dr. James Peterson featured Dr. McKinley Melton, chair of Africana Studies at Rhodes College, who discussed how the lessons of the civil rights movement continue to shape today's struggles for justice. And on ecoWURD magazine, Fox of the Clean Air Council on explain the significance of a new EPA ruling that strengthens oversight of polluters at U.S. Steel's Irvin plant and Neville Chemical. But first, WVON host Cleopatra Draper joined Wake Up With WURD with Solomon Jones to share firsthand insight on what's unfolding in Chicago.
We are joined by Cleopatra Draper. She is a host on our sister station, WVON in Chicago. Cleopatra, good morning.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. So Chicago, of course, at the center of the news universe at this point, as we are watching what's happening there with ICE and with now National Guard troops coming in. What's the mood there in Chicago, especially in the Black community?
Very tense.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you for inviting me on the show. So
Absolutely.
I really appreciate it. Very tense, uncomfortable, and bottom line, drawing a seed of division. You know, ideally, you are seeing videos of Latinos, but Black folks too. Mm-hmm. I covered the story of a brother that was already restrained in handcuffs and literally being choked. Right? So you can't identify to whom is ICE and who is Homeland Security because they're all in costume, i.e. fatigue. And the fact that they're not identifying themselves and very aggressive. And when you look at the protests, I mean, between the flash grenades, the rubber bullets, it's almost as though they're stoking not only the preemptive attribute of violence, but creating the scene. Mm-hmm. So particularly when they did the Black Hawk Down version of the building on 75th and South Shore Drive, they separated both Black residents and Latino and zip-tied. Some of the babies were unclothed, pulled up in budget rental trucks, like from moving furniture, so not even adequate transportation, and detained folks for several hours. And as a result, many of the residents came back to nothing. Homes distorted, personal belongings robbed and pillaged, doors blown off the hinges. So the question begs, for those that really opted and voted for this under the pretenses of safety, do you feel safe?
So let me
safer?
Yeah, let me ask you this question, because we've heard from the mayor of Chicago, who of course is pushing back on this, Mayor Brandon Johnson, and now Donald Trump now saying on social media posts that the mayor and the governor have not protected ICE agents there. What are some of the community leaders in Chicago saying about what's happening? What are they saying and what are they doing about what's happening there?
I laugh because the thought itself that those that were sent to protect us, ideally, because, you know, we're unsafe and this is a allegedly violent city, need protection. Yeah. Right. We're already depleted. So what Mayor Brandon Johnson is saying, if you really want to help Chicago, fill our coffers. Mm-hmm. You robbed us of 30% of the budget. $75.6 billion is in the coffers of ICE and Homeland Security, the most we've ever seen historically. Yeah. So why would you deplete AFT? Why would you deplete FBI? Why would you deplete the resources that we need? We're still trying to find the revenue to pay our CPD, Chicago Police Department. So the fact that those that were sent ideally to protect Chicago needs protection is silly, right? Because you were uninvited. And if you're going to invite yourselves into the indoctrination of what our leadership is saying, right? So you have those that are quietly sitting by. Everybody's not vocalizing. In fact, I read on my show 13 of the alders that are in support, 4 of whom are Black, right? So they support the fact that ICE is here. So everybody's not on the fray. There are some that are in support. The remaining alders are both Latino and Caucasian, but we have 50 alder people.
Explain to us, because here we call those city council people. Explain to us what an alderman or alder person is.
So our alders, they've shortened the name, but our alder people represent our various wards. We have 50 wards here in the city of Chicago, and then you have the presiding president, whom is the mayor, Mayor Brandon Johnson. Of those 50, that makes up the entire city, right? 13 of them signed a letter in support, right? Of that, 4 of whom are Black. The Black caucus is one of the largest caucus. Yeah. So ultimately, a few of them are Latino and have the vast majority of Latinos in their wards. So there's some discrepancy as to where everybody stands, but the vast majority are not in support. They're not as vocal, but they're not in support because there are some that, you know, are sitting back watching, just trying to see how long this shakes loose. But the National Guard is here. Yeah. Greg Abbott has deployed his troops despite the warning of the federal judge to hold tight. And then the activation of the Illinois Guard against our governor, J.B. Pritzker. For what? You know, at the end of the day, I've explained to my listening audience, me as a person, Cleopatra, what make me feel safe is when Black folks are working a living wage. And they have health care, and they have affordable housing, you know, a quality of life that we deserve. Yeah. When that is rendered and given a fair and equitable opportunity, we all thrive. You know, so this pseudo environment of safety is a ploy, and I'm just sitting back waiting on the Epstein files. Yeah. That's all.
Yeah, I hear you. We're talking with Cleopatra Draper. She is a host on WVON in Chicago, our sister station there. And so in terms of the protests, what we've seen it reported is that some of the protests in Broadview outside of Chicago have been met with gas, tear gas and pepper spray and other things. What's happening within the city of Chicago, and is the reporting on what's happening in Broadview accurate?
Oh, it's accurate. Okay. It's been met with force. So Broadview is right outside the skirts. That's what we would call the Chicagoland area. In fact, I just watched video last night of ICE and Homeland Security trolling Berwyn. Berwyn is also a suburb. I mean, literally like Nazi Germany asking people for their papers. Do you have ID? You know, not self-identifying, but you're in my community asking me, what do I have? In the inner city, you know, the activity, if anything, is sporadic. Just like the Black Hawk Down iteration, that came in the middle of the night. Yeah. In a predominantly Black community. You know, so there's no organized efforts. There's no communication being structured between Homeland Security, ICE, and our Chicago Police Department or our mayor's office or governor's office. It is very unsafe. We had a woman that was shot by one of the two entities, took herself to the hospital.
Now, when you say one of the two entities, you mean Homeland Security and ICE? Okay.
Right, because the National Guard just got here. Yeah. So now it's 3-pronged. But because they're in costume, this camouflage fatigue, you don't know who they are. Like literally they're masked. They're not revealing their identity. On many of the videos, they come off very aggressive. Bovino has given direct orders by any means necessary in terms of everybody that's not white. He said that to a reporter. Anybody that doesn't look like you in a report.
Wait a minute. Let's back up. So define who is Bovino and what did he say about everybody that's not white?
Bovino is who's in charge of leading this escapation of Homeland Security and ICE. Bovino is under the directive and the thumb of Donald Trump. Bovino was sporadically interviewed about a week ago. I almost want to say CNN. Mm-hmm. And the interviewer was a Caucasian male. And the interviewer asked him, "To whom are you looking for?" Mm-hmm. He said, "Anybody that don't look like you." Mm. Okay. Mm. So the fact that SCOTUS, the Supreme Court justices, have given the green light to pretty much racially profile, all bets are off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that, of course, was a ruling by the Supreme Court based on what was happening in Los Angeles, and said that they could use racial profiling in order to enforce immigration laws. And so that's what's happening in Chicago. Tell us about the shooting. What led up to that? How has the community responded to that?
You know, allegedly, they accused the woman of trying to block off they being ICE, Homeland Security, ability to get through the street. And they literally shot at her vehicle. And as a result, they shot her. It wasn't fatal, obviously. She was able to take herself to the hospital. But that triggered a response in our city council and our governor to justify why their presence is unwanted and unwarranted, because it is stoking not only fear, but creating this orchestrated scene for, the news feeds, the clips, the justification for them to be here. And it's without probable cause. All it's doing is hunting people that are working class people, working poor people that are feeding into our society. Initially, if this was to have been enacted the way that they presented it to the American public, you were going off after the hardcore criminals. I mean, clearing out Home Depot, Lowe's, showing up at your job, snatching people in broad daylight, walking in the community. I just think beyond excessive is gross. Yeah. If the Republican Party was sincerely serious, not only do you have the Oval Office, the House, and the Senate, but you have the Supreme Court justices. Mm-hmm. So therefore, bring some serious legislation. Because that hasn't happened, this is food for fodder to make us really think from a humanitarian standpoint, is this the correct approach? And I am starting to see people have true buyer's remorse.
Yeah. We're talking with Cleopatra Draper. She is from WVON in Chicago. They are our sister station. And as we watch what's going on and Black people begin to see what's happening, not just in the Latino community, but in the Black community, what is the Black community doing to protect itself in Chicago? And what is being said by the leadership in terms of what the community needs to do?
You will see some trainings about know your rights.
Yeah.
But I think the reality for Black Chicago, there's a video, like I said, that I played on my show, the Cleopatra Show, that a brother was already in handcuffs because he was chased by ICE and Homeland Security and being choked, like physically choked, restrained from breathing. There's a brother, an African-American man that's recording, and you can hear him say, "Hey, man, let him go. Let him go. I thought y'all were only here to choke the Mexicans." It was a big deal a couple days ago because that was a sure reality that some people thought to be true.
Yeah.
In other words, this was a green light to get down on Brown, right? And my stance was, even if they got down on Brown, you think they'll miss an opportunity to get back Black?
Come on now.
Right? At the end of the day,
come on now.
It's a free-for-all. Mm-hmm. Bovino told you, if you really listen to him, I'm looking for everybody that don't look like you. Yeah. And when he was talking to that Caucasian male reporter, it was crystal clear. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of what's happening in Black Chicago is, oh my God, So we on the table too. I'm trying to figure out when you thought you got off the table, because you sure wasn't sitting at it. We've been on the menu. Okay, so for Black leaders, 4 of whom on a city level are in support of this.
Yeah.
You have Dr. Willie Wilson, who went to try to testify on the Hill because he's in support of welcoming the National Guard. But what I remind Black America is you are signing up to deliberately and willingly will away your constitutional rights. So this is deeper than just hunting people, bounty hunters of 2025. This is the erosion of where we stand as American citizens and the disappearance of democracy alongside people and the rise of autocracy.
That's Cleopatra Draper. She is the host of a show in WVON Chicago. Tell us when and where we can hear your show, Cleopatra.
You can hear the Cleopatra Show Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. to 12 noon every day. So come hang out with your favorite millennial. I appreciate the opportunity to be on with WURD in Philly, and I look forward to coming back. And you have to come on with us. I appreciate the relationship we have. It means a lot to us.
Yes, it means a lot to us as well. Cleopatra, thank you so much. We appreciate the perspective you share with us today. Make sure you support this sister and check out her show. Cleopatra Draper, thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
You're listening to The Week on Word.
Good morning. It's Solomon Jones, host of the hottest morning show on radio, Wake Up With WURD. Listen weekdays from 7 to 10 a.m. for laughter, for fun, for politics, for family, for more than you can imagine. Check it out every day, Monday through Friday. Wake Up With WURD on 96.1 FM, 900 AM, WURD.
This is The Week on Word, a podcast highlighting the top conversations on Word Radio. Make sure you look for and follow WURD Radio on social media. Up next, Dr. McKinley Melton, Chair of Africana Studies at Rhodes College, on Evening Words with Dr. James Peterson.
Folks, I am super excited to welcome to this program my dear friend for the Tuesday teach-in, Dr. McKinley Melton, Associate Professor and Chair of Africana Studies at Rhodes College. Dr. Melton specializes in Africana literature, culture, and political movements. And prior to being at Rhodes College, Dr. Melton served as the inaugural Teaching Chair and Associate Professor of English at Gettysburg College right here in Pennsylvania. Here to talk about Africana Studies coursework at Rhodes College and his work with the Furious Flower Poetry Center. Happy and excited to welcome to this program Dr. McKinley Melton. Mac, how you feeling, good brother?
I'm doing all right. Good evening. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. Dr. Melton, before we really dive into the Tuesday teaching proper and talk about your classes and your work, I know that you studied political movements, and I know we also, for folks who don't know, Rhodes College is in Memphis. Sadly, Memphis has been in the news a bit because this administration has named Memphis as one of the cities that it may target with National Guard and militarization of the streets. Given your deep knowledge of the civil rights movement and historical times where there have been confrontations between Black communities and law enforcement, or Black communities and the American military, talk to us a little bit about how are you interpreting this moment, and are your students talking about it at all? Are they just head down doing the work, not thinking about it? How does this showing up for you at Rhodes College?
So, okay, we're going to dive right into the big things.
Come on.
I respect it. So one of the things that I will start just by saying is that I am, as you pointed out in your intro, I am relatively new to Rhodes. So this is just my second year at Rhodes, my second year in Memphis. I moved here in the summer of 2024. And before we even get into that, I really want to start by saying Memphis is an amazing city. It's been a warm city. Yes. It's a welcoming city. The people are great. The people are super friendly. And, you know, since I've been here, I just keep saying it's an amazing city with terrible PR, right? I mean, the narratives around this city are not at all aligned with the reality of what it is to live here, right? And there are many, many reasons why this is, and we know this. It's a majority Black city, 65% Black city, and it is It is a city that has been much maligned, and very much unfairly, right? So I just want to start there. One of the things that we have seen in this particular moment as majority black cities, cities with black mayors, blue cities, continue to be demonized and vilified by narratives that simply don't align with the reality of what it is to live here, the reality of what it is to teach here, to work here, and to engage with many students who are from this area. They are coming from Tennessee. They're coming from the Mid-South. And so one of the first things is that students are really learning firsthand how easily the reality can be manipulated when other people have the power of the microphone or the power of the pulpit. And so I'll start simply there by pointing out that this is not new, that this is part of a long-standing tradition of just telling blatant untruths about Black spaces, about Black families, about Black communities. In terms of what's happening in this current moment, the students are talking about it. We're all thinking about it. There is certainly concern, and there's a lot of concern not about this manufactured war zone that is allegedly Memphis, but what the introduction of this kind of overzealous, hyper-vigilant, and guardrail-less policing might bring to the city. There are students who are concerned about undocumented people. They are concerned about anyone who is existing in this moment with a warrant, who may or may not even know that they have a warrant. It's a thing that's on a lot of people's minds. It's a conversation on a lot of people's minds and hearts, and understandably so. And I know we'll transition a bit into the courses later, but I'll say that one of the classes I'm teaching right now is the literature of the civil rights movement. And I've been teaching this course since 2014. It was when I first developed it with the idea that I would teach it based on the anniversary of the summer of 64. And I was going to be able to really kind of highlight all of these anniversaries. And we could talk about this, we could talk about that. I had some amazing stuff lined up. I had, at the time, Julian Bond came in to speak to my class, brought him up from D.C., Gettysburg. It was an amazing experience, but I had plotted this all out, thinking summer of 64, we're hitting these anniversaries. And about a week before the semester, Michael Brown and Ferguson blew up in August of 2014. And so I have taught this course now a few times. And even this semester, I'm saying I would love to be able to teach this course and have it not feel relevant and not feel immediate. But 2025, it once again feels immediate. And it's just, it resonates perpetually.
It does. I'm reading and teaching Frederick Douglass this week, and I'll be honest with you, Dr. Melton. It's making me furious, right? It's literally making me mad, right? I'm not mad in the classroom, but just to read an experience, I can only imagine what the literature of the civil rights movement course is like, especially in your capable intellectual hands. I know you saw some of the images coming out of Chicago from last week. I'm not sure how to, because, students will ask you about, what do you think about this? Or did you see this? Professor Melton, what is going on here? I don't know really how to answer those questions. And I've been at this a little bit longer than you have, Dr. Melton. I'm not sure how to answer those questions. How do you answer the questions about some of the things that are popping up and coming across students' screens? And they're coming into a classroom like yours, where some of them are having an awakening, some of them are being inspired by the things that they're reading, and then many of them are being sensitized to seeing those kinds of things, but not seeing them in 2025. How do you even talk about what happened in Chicago last week with ICE and the flash grenades and running people out of their homes and madness, no discernment. They don't care whether this is what I try to tell Black folks all the time. They don't care whether you're immigrant or not. Right. That's not what this is about. Right. So, but I don't know how do you process things like that with your students, Professor Melton?
So I'll say, first of all, we were actually just talking about Chicago this morning, because again, I'm in the civil rights movement literature, right? But we just finished Raisin in the Sun. And so we were having this whole conversation about the ways that we have incorrectly, retroactively talked about the civil rights movement as though it only happened in Birmingham and Alabama, and Memphis and, Albany. And that part of the reason why I have Raisin in the Sun on the syllabus is because I think it's important for the students to really grapple with the reality that the civil rights movement, that Jim Crow was not just a creation of the American South. And so we spent a lot of time talking about Chicago and talking about redlining today and talking about the ways in which you build out intergenerational restrictions on the building of wealth, the building of power. We talked a lot about the Great Migration, and we talked a lot about the reality that, quite frankly, the 21st century would not be what it has been in the United States were it not for the Great Migration and were it not for Chicago, because we would not have had Obama if we had not had the Great Migration and if we had not left Chicago. And so getting students to understand this moment within the arc of history, I think is always really important, to get them to process their shock by asking them, why are you so shocked? What is it about this moment that has caught you off guard? And how can we think about that? I mean, again, I'm teaching Africana Studies, but we focus on literature, right? And so the students often find themselves getting more politics than they thought they were when they signed up for a pretty class about pretty poems. But the reality is, part of what we talk about is narrative. We talk about how do stories get built? How do understandings get shaped? And so part of what it is to really grapple with this moment is to recognize that this moment did not materialize out of thin air, that there are historical kind of precedents and antecedents that have made this moment possible. And so that's a big part of what I try to invite students to do, that we're reading this play from 1959, but it is speaking to what's happening in 2025. And the fact that we're surprised is because there has been a concerted effort to make us think that civil rights was a problem of Birmingham and not of Chicago. So we're shocked to see this happening in Chicago. But the reality is we shouldn't be, because if we understand the history of Chicago as a Black political center, then we understand why there is such tremendous effort to bring Chicago to heel in this moment.
Yeah, I think it's not a mistake. It's not ironic that the places that are being targeted are cultivating spaces for Black political consciousness, right? Whether that's LA or Chicago or Memphis. I mean, right. These are sites of historic developments around Black political consciousness. We've name checked this literature, the Civil Rights Movement course, a couple times. Let's break it down a little bit before we have to take our first break. Talk to us a little bit about some of the key pieces you mentioned. A Raisin in the Sun. For you, what are the formative texts that you've designed in the course to help students get a literary sense of what the civil rights movement was all about?
Yeah. So one of the key things that I start with is that though we do read I Have a Dream speech and we read the Letter from Birmingham Jail, I love Letter from Birmingham Jail. I
love it too. It's rhetorically incredible.
It's just it's a rhetorical masterpiece.
It is. Wait, say that again. It really is. It really is.
It is. I mean, it's a rhetorical masterpiece. And I love I Have a Dream, better known for me as the Bad Check speech. But I do think that Birmingham Letter is a far superior piece of writing. That said, I'm very intentional about spending time not just talking about MLK and not just talking about Malcolm X. We do read The Ballad of the Bullet, Message to the Grassroots. But I really try to get us to focus on some of the lesser known figures and some of the folks who don't get the attention. So one of the things we just read a couple of weeks ago is an amazing collection of poetry called Turn Me Loose, The Unghosting of Medgar Evers, written by Frank X. Walker. And it's a collection of poems that pivots around the life and the death of Medgar Evers. And it is a collection of persona poems where Walker writes poems from the voice of Murley Evers. He writes poems from the voice of Byron De La Beckwith, Medgar Evers' assassin. There are poems that are written from the voice of Charles Evers. And there's even a poem that's written from the perspective of the bullet, that killed Medgar. And that's a collection that I find really powerful because quite frankly, Walker takes us into some of the psychology of white supremacy by giving us Byron de la Beckwith as a narrative voice, as well as his two wives, and really invites us to think not just about this violence, but where this violence comes from and what is the psychology of white racist violence. So that's a great collection. We have a collection of short stories that we work our way through over the course of the semester. We're getting ready now to head into fall break. And when we return from fall break next week, we're actually kicking into one of my favorite texts of the semester, which is The Fire Next Time. And so we'll move into The Fire Next Time. And then we have more short stories.
That's James Baldwin. That's James Baldwin's essay collection, The Fire Next Time.
Baldwin. Yes. I didn't assume. Yes, James Baldwin. One of my absolute 100% GOAT in terms of writing. And so we'll do The Fire Next Time, and we'll make our way through more collected pieces. And we actually end our semester with Assata. So I was really, really sad to be mourning her, but excited that I'm going to be kind of closing out the class as we shift into Black Power, thinking about, Assata as the kind of closing voice for our semester.
I'm writing about Assata right now. It's in editorial at the moment, and hard to describe, but just a devastating loss for a lot of reasons. I mean, rest in power, Assata. Just that memoir, though. I know her activism and her leadership and all those things are important, but that memoir is a gift. That autobiography is a gift. It's great that you're teaching it. It's great that it's still available, but it really is a gift. And one of the things I love about you teaching in this class, Dr. Melton, is that the structure of her autobiography taps into these different historical kinds of texts. It's in some ways structured like a narrative written by an enslaved person from the 19th century. It's in some ways structured around the different moments that you're thinking through in the civil rights movement. Even though she may not have considered herself a civil rights activist, she might have considered herself more of a Black liberation activist as opposed to civil rights. But she understands the structures of literature that come out of our people, which makes that text all the more powerful. We got about a minute before we got to take our first break here, Dr. Melton. And I just want to go back to Medgar Evers' Assassin really quickly, because you mentioned the fact that Walker's poem gives us some insight into that white supremacist, the murderous white supremacist psychology. Can you share what's revealed or what's excavated in some of that poetry for the benefit of some of our listeners who probably have not read that particular collection?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the biggest threads, right, in the narrative voice of Byron de la Beckwith really is these kind of echoes of what we talk about now as this great replacement theory, this tremendous fear of what Black achievement can do, and what it would do in terms of dismantling the very fragile kind of sensibilities of white supremacy, right? And a big part of it, I mean, there's a lot in there that is, kind of echoing these fears around miscegenation and quote unquote race mixing, this kind of imagined threat to the purity of white women.
Medgar Evers was married to a Black woman, though. What are we talking about here?
Well, in Byron's Nightmares, right? There's a series of poems that are titled, Byron Dreaming. And in his Nightmares, this is all just a massive plot by these, troublemaking Negroes to get their hands on white women ultimately, right? But what Walker does so beautifully with the collection is that he does give voice to Murley, and he does remind us of the love that was existing in the Evers household between Murley and Medgar, the way they focused on their children. This reminder that, again, the narratives around what Black activists were seeking and the reality of what they were really seeking, right? I think Walker does a really good job of giving us both the delusions of white supremacy as well as the intimacies in this Black, family, in this Black household, about what they were actually looking for when they said, we're looking for equality and we're looking for freedom and liberation for our people.
You are teaching other courses in addition to this incredible literature, the civil rights movement course. One of them is contemporary African American literature, which is my field somehow. I don't know how that happened, but I'm curious as to where we are with contemporary African American lit. We've had different scholars suggest that African American lit over or it's at its end. We've had, we've had scholars who have, we're in this moment where people are reflecting a little bit about whether or not terms of self-identification like African American are still accurate and appropriate. I kind of want to know where you are with the nomenclature of the course before you kind of tell us what the syllabus looks like.
Yeah, so the course is titled Contemporary African American Literature. I always get into this conversation with students around, I'm chair of Africana Studies, and this is an African American literature course. And, what do we do with the language of kind of the Black diaspora? And for me, I'm really intentional about, talking to students about the fact that there is some fungibility between these terminologies, but that they do mean different things, right? That they are speaking to different histories and traditions. And we spend a lot of time thinking about what the word Black really means as a political identity, as a kind of a diasporan reality, in the idea that, as I frame it for the students, right, African Americans are Black, but not all Blacks are African American, right? I mean, we have to really think about Afro-Caribbean traditions. We've got, our Afro-British brothers and sisters, right? That there is a way that Blackness moves beyond borders, and really getting students to think about what that means and what that looks like in terms of even the literary tradition. Primarily, just as a scholar, I'm trained as an African Americanist. I have some work that reaches out across the diaspora, but I am primarily one who is trained in the traditions of Black American, African American writing. And so that tends to be where I focus. But I'm often inviting students to think about where this tradition sits within the broader diaspora, and how we can think about African American writers in conversation with Afro-Caribbean writers, in conversation with Afro-British writers, and so on and so forth.
So talk to us a little bit about the course. How are you? What are the periodic framings for contemporary? Some folks are still teaching 20th century African American as quote unquote contemporary, and I think that in some cases could be accurate. But where are you at on the periodic spectrum, if you will?
So I am very, very contemporary with this course in particular. This was the thing I thought a lot about when I first developed it. Originally, I kind of thought, I'll just tell my age to your listeners. I was born in 82, and I was thinking, well, we'll start with The Color Purple. If it was done in my lifetime, I'm going to count that as, contemporary. And then I went into 21st century. And then as I developed the course, what I really ended up doing was that everything is written in the last 10 years.
Wow.
And so it's a very contemporary course.
It's actually contemporary African American.
Contemporary, because for these students, 1982, like Color Purple may as well be like the Harlem Renaissance.
It's ancient history. Seriously, it's ancient history for them.
Because they're like the late 1900s. Like, what is that? So I go 21st century, and then it just kind of, I think like the second time I taught it, I looked and I realized everything here is from the last 10 years. And so I just kind of adopted that as my parameter. So we do start with historical fiction. So we actually started with Colson Whitehead's The Nickel Boys, because again, I want students to understand a historical arc to what we're talking about.
A brilliant novel.
But it's an amazing novel, and it begs this question, right? Of, even though parts of the novel, of course, are set in the 21st century, why is he writing this novel now about this time then, right? And so we think about historical fiction and how that offers us a frame for what contemporary writers are trying to do. And then, we just finished today a book that I suppose the students would think of as historical fiction. It's Mecca Jamila Sullivan's Big Girl, which just published last year, but it's set in the 80s and the 90s. There was a reference to Saved by the Bell and Lisa Turtle, and my students were like, we didn't know who that was, so we had to Google it. So I realized at that moment, this is historical fiction for them. But, me, I'm
Shout
like,
out to Mecca.
Really
Mecca's a great writer, great artist. Good Lord. Yeah.
Beautiful writer, beautiful writer. And the way she uses language, it really is an amazing experience kind of going through that with students. But we'll move from here. We looked at Patricia Smith, Incendiary Art. After fall break, we're moving into Kiese Layman's Heavy.
That's a heavy text, no pun intended. Yeah.
It is a heavy text, and a powerful one. And Kiese absolutely strikes at the heart of a number of things that we are thinking about and talking about in this moment. And then
he also represents the South like no other contemporary writer right now, in my opinion.
Absolutely doesn't. And while I'm on it, I'm going to say really quickly as a plug, among the many hats I wear is that I'm also part of the executive committee for the College Language Association. And we are going to be having our 84th annual convention in Jackson, Mississippi in April. And Kiese Layman is going to be our keynote speaker. So we're really excited about being in Jackson with Kiese Layman. We'll be there from April the 8th through the 11th, 2026. CLA is the oldest and largest organization for scholars of language and literature, for Black scholars of language and literature. And we're going to be having a really good time down in Jackson. So I just wanted to throw that plug out there.
I love that plug, Dr. Melton. And I have to put that on my calendar. You know, it coincides with the time of year that I'm usually at our alma mater. So I got to take a look at it and see how it all shakes out. But I haven't been to CLA in years. I love CLA. What an incredible convention of Black scholars. Incredible.
Yeah. It is. So we'll do some Kiese Layman. We do Thierry Jones and American Marriage. Mm-hmm. And really part of what I love about this course is that it is intentionally multi-genre. We look at poetry. We look at nonfiction. We look at fiction. We do short stories. I'm doing Nafisa Thompson Spires, Heads of the Colored People. And then we're also looking at Dinez Smith, Black Movie is how we close out the semester. So it's really this, it is all work within the last 10 years, which makes me a little sad that I'm going to have to take Black Movie out the next time I teach it because we're coming right up on 10 years. But, you know, fortunately, Dinez is doing some great work. So I'm just going to pull one of their more recent collections for the next time.
Right. But what I wouldn't give to Ear Hustle one of your classes, incredible. We only have a couple minutes left here, so I want to make sure we get your last class in, which is a class on spoken word. It's called Voice and Visibility. Talk to us before you go into that class. Can you talk to us about your work with Furious Flower? There are probably some listeners in our audience not familiar with this extremely important institution, really, of poetry for the Black community.
Yeah, so Furious Flower, I have the honor of serving as the chair of the advisory board. Furious Flower is the nation's first academic center dedicated to Black poetry. It was founded by the one and only Dr. Joanne Gabin, and it has been housed at James Madison University since 1994. Dr. Gabin retired a few years ago. It is now being led in the capable hands of Lauren K. Allain, a wonderful scholar and poet in her own right, who is now directing the center. It's just an amazing resource of archival materials, of programming. We have a big conference every 10 years. We just had it in 2014, so the next one will be 2024. But it's just an amazing gathering ground for Black poets, for scholars of Black poetry. And it's just a resource that I can't possibly talk about it enough in the time we have left. But I will direct your readers, if you're looking for some of that work, just Google the Furious Flower Syllabus, an amazing project that just got released last year, which is really about anyone who feels any apprehension about teaching Black poetry. Come to this. It's a guide that'll give you resources that you need. Classrooms of all ages, community centers, YMCAs, public libraries. If you want to do a workshop or with Black poetry as your core material, go check out that resource and you'll find something of use.
The Furious Flower Syllabus. Now let's talk about your course, Voice and Visibility, African Americans and the Power of Spoken Word.
Right. So that is a course that is it's just absolutely, it has my heart. It's a course I created kind of out of thin air back in 2010, and I've been teaching it pretty regularly since. It is a course that is really about the Black oral tradition. Students sign up often thinking they're just going to talk about hip hop and they're just going to kind of watch slam poetry. And we do a lot of that. But before we get there, we've got to start with the griot of West African tale telling. We got to start with the folk tales. We talk about the blues. We talk about the Black sermon and the worship traditions coming out of the Black church. And then we make our way into the contemporary moment. And so what I love about this course is it is one of those opportunities to really think across chronology. And so the course is organized thematically so that we will think about, religion and the influence of Christianity on Black American culture and politics. And we will look at Frederick Douglass, Frederick Douglass's Appendix, right alongside Jesus Walks by Kanye, right alongside Chance the Rapper's Blessings. And we'll think about what is going on with the influence of Black Christian thought within the oral tradition, right? We think about Sojourner Truth right alongside Beyonce, right alongside Jill Scott, right alongside Frances Harper, when we're thinking about framings of Black womanhood. And so it's a course that really gets students to try to think again about that connection. You're probably noticing there's a little bit of a trend for me. Like, even as I have students in the contemporary moment, I want them always recognizing that this comes from someplace, right? That this is rooted in something, that there are traditions, there are ideas, and not just, a history of oppression, right? But there is a tradition of Black creativity and Black resistance and Black culture that goes beyond 1619 and leads us right into this contemporary moment.
Dr. McKinley Melton, Associate Professor and Chair of Africana Studies at the great Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee. Dr. Melton, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to enlighten us, to blow up this Tuesday teaching like nobody else has ever done before. I appreciate you, good brother. I got to get you back on here. We got to have you back on here. But I appreciate you.
I would love to come back.
And appreciate the work, Doc. We really, really do.
This is the Week on Word. Represent your favorite station in style. Look for Afrocentric tees, hoodies, tumblers, notebooks, mugs, and more. Just click the Shop tab at wordradio.com. Show the world that you're all about Black Talk Media.
You gotta look good.
You're listening to the Week on Word podcast. To learn more about our programming, visit WURDradio.com. Last conversation for this episode features Annie Fox of the Clean Air Council on ecoWURD magazine.
We got today's special guest kicking off the show. We got Annie Fox, who's a staff attorney for Clean Air Council. And today we're going to be talking about some things that's going on when it comes down to the EPA's decision to grant petitions objecting. Yes, thank God, right? The EPA is on our side, objecting flawed air pollution permits for U.S. Steel's Irvin factories and a chemical plant also in Pennsylvania as well. So we're going to be talking about that with Annie. Good morning, Annie. Welcome to WRD. Welcome to ecoWURD. How you feeling?
I'm feeling great, and thank you for having me.
Yes, please introduce yourself and let the people know exactly who you're listening to.
Well, I am Annie Fox, and I work out of Clean Air Council's Philadelphia office. Clean Air Council is a local environmental health organization that has been fighting to protect everyone's everyone's right to breathe clean and healthy air since 1967.
Yes. And the EPA is finally on our side. They're finally making some just due. They're breaking some things right here in the state of Pennsylvania. And they actually just blocked, some things from happening with some permits. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, first, I want to say that just having this happen really does show it shows how much people power can really do. Because even now, under this administration, there are people at EPA that really sincerely want to do their jobs. And when people raise their voices, we can still be heard. And so that's really important. So as you were saying, there were two permits that were given to each of these facilities. And these are large polluting facilities out in southwestern Pennsylvania. One of them is U.S. Steel's Irvin Works, which processes the steel made there. And then the other is Neville Chemicals. They make plastics and such that are used in coatings, adhesives, ink, things like everyday items that we don't really think about having a large environmental impact, but they do. Now, when there's a really large polluting facility, you have to have air pollution permits that put limits on how much of each pollutant can be spewed into the air. And that's the only way to protect public health at all. But those limits don't mean much if we're not looking to see how much they're actually emitting, right? And so there's something called a Title V permit, an operating permit. And what that does is it puts all the requirements that are needed to make sure that the polluter is really following the rules. That's the testing for emissions, the monitoring, reporting to the permitting agency, all of that stuff. And now, whenever there's a permit like this, what's really important to know is that people have the right to make their voices heard and to weigh in. It's called submitting public comments.
Yes, I agree. Community input is extremely important in these type of decisions.
Very important.
Yeah. Especially because we're paying property taxes, right?
You don't even have to be paying the property taxes for that. I mean, just when there's a permit like this, you have the right to comment. And so that's one of the things we and some of our partners did. We submitted very detailed comments, getting into a lot of technical detail that we wouldn't be able to do without, in our case, our engineers on staff really help us dive deep. But the upshot is, a lot of times in these permits, they're supposed to make sure that the emissions limits are followed, but there might be an hourly emission limit. Mm-hmm. That means only so much can be spewed into the air each hour. But you look at the permit to see how does it make sure they're doing this, and they might test every 5 years. So you can see there's a bit of a mismatch there. Mm-hmm. And so for these permits and for other permits, what we were looking to see how much of a match is there. And so we commented saying, the conditions that you've put here, the requirements for testing and monitoring, it's not enough. You're not going to be able to really tell if they're violating their permits, if they're emitting too much pollution. Mm-hmm. And so the first step is to do the comments, but they didn't make all the changes to the permit that we knew were necessary. So the next step under the Clean Air Act for this kind of permit, EPA has the ability to object to one of these Title V permits. And if they don't do it on their own, citizens have the right to then petition EPA. Citizens who have already commented have the right to petition EPA.
And that's the part, Annie, that most people don't know about as far as being, involved in community engagement when it comes down to these decisions. Most people don't know that once they make the decision, you can actually counter that.
Yes. So there often are more steps that can be taken. Mm-hmm. And so in this case, we asked EPA in this petition to object to the permits based on a number of claims that largely had to do with insufficient testing and monitoring. And on almost every claim, EPA actually granted our petition and objected to the permit. Mm-hmm. Now, what this means is it goes back to the permitting agency now, to the Allegheny County Health Department, and they're going to have to look at each of EPA's objections and either explain how the requirements that they already have in there really do ensure that these facilities are going to be meeting their pollution limits, or they're going to have to put more stringent requirements. And from cases where we've done similar, we followed this process before, like for U.S. Steel's other two facilities in the area, Clairton Coke Works and Edgar Thompson Works.
Yeah, and we know just what just happened at Coke Works.
Yeah, so that's been in the news quite a bit lately.
Yeah,
but we know that we anticipate that they are going to be giving some more stringent conditions that will more effectively be able to tell, are these permits being violated? And let me
ask you this really quick question, and please keep your thought, because I just want to ask you a quick question as you go through this, right? Because when I advocate for these things because I want change to happen, right? So like how I came on the show saying, the EPA was founding on our side, right? And something similar is happening in the metropolitan area in DC, where they're trying to actually build a huge, humongous data center, in Landover, Maryland. And they actually petitioned. The community got, their answers granted, and they put the word pause there, right? So I wanted to ask you just, by vocabulary, using different words, that actually is why some people still don't trust these different type of departments when it comes down to actually helping the community, because they use words like, we're going to put it on a pause. Or, for example, for this one, they said, we're going to send it back to the health department, Allegheny Health Department, for revisions, So it's not necessarily saying it's not going to happen. It's just saying as of right now. And I think that's where it gets a lot of people, still in that trust factor, like, are they really helping us? So I wanted to know your thoughts.
Well, there are a couple things. One is that you can't just think, okay, they listened, we're done, now we're not going to pay attention anymore. Mm-hmm. You have to keep paying attention every step along the way. You have to find out where in your community there are notices of actions that are happening and follow them all the way through. But it does mean that there's going to be some changes here. Mm-hmm. Now, whether those changes are just them taking a closer look and really seeing that, okay, these requirements are enough, which in this case, we don't believe that will happen, at least not for some of these pollutants, or whether they make substantive changes. Mm-hmm. You know, that to some degree, that's a wait and see. But the thing is, what's happening now is they do have to have a new proposed permit. So it's not like they're just going to respond to EPA. EPA gives a thumbs up or thumbs down. That's not how this works. Okay. For this right now, it's kind of going back to square one. They're going to do a new proposed permit that will then go out for public comment again. And that's another opportunity for the public to look really closely. What does this new permit say? Does this really match what EPA said? Does it really address all of those objections? And if not, people need to comment and say, hey, no, this doesn't. And if it does, people should give them props, you know, because there are people at ACHD that are working really hard to try to do things the right way. They have constraints too. They're very underfunded right now, and that's a whole separate issue.
Yeah, I mean, we're all going through that one right now.
Yeah, exactly.
And for those who are just tuning in, I just want to tap back in for those who are just tuning in, Annie. You're listening to Annie Fox, who's the attorney staff over at Clean Air Council for the city of Philadelphia. And right now we're talking clean air in general, but specifically in Allegheny County, where the EPA just came through and blocked some permits for revision in order for us to have clean air. And Annie, before you go back into your comment, I do just want to ask a simple question about clean air, just for your thoughts, right? Especially here in the city of Philadelphia. What do you think we're dealing with, you know, going in 2026 as we're in October right now, going in 2026? What do you think we're dealing with just in Philadelphia as far as clean air? Do you think it's going to get better over time as the city is pushing for a greener Philly? Or do you think we're stuck, you know, in a very hard place? Because even though, you know, Philadelphia is pushing for a cleaner, safer city, we still live in Pennsylvania where we're building data centers and, you know, steel mills are still, you know, working, occupying every day.
It's tricky. I think everything that Philadelphia is doing to work towards cleaner air, that's valuable. Local action is so very valuable. And particularly when we see the federal administration backing off and protecting public health, got to step up locally. Mm-hmm. And to the extent that if you're seeing Philadelphia government do that, that's wonderful. But there's some things in the pike that really concern me as far as Philadelphia's air quality. Now, there's something that is happening on a federal level right now called the withdrawal of the endangerment finding. And what that is EPA under the Clean Air Act can have regulations for pollutants that endanger human health and welfare. In 2009, after a court case, EPA found that greenhouse gases, those pollutants that are driving climate change, they endanger human health and welfare. And I think it's really clear. And in Philadelphia, I don't think there's really much denying the effects that you've been already seeing there. Yeah. But now Zeldin, EPA Administrator Zeldin, he thinks climate change is a hoax. That's what he's saying, right? He calls it, I think, the climate change cult or something like that, even though pretty much every credible scientist out there has been saying for decades the writing's on the wall. And if anything,
we can see it, like it's part of our reality. Right?
It really is. And, you know, the world I see is so different than even the world my kids see.
That's real.
You know, because I can look back to when I was a kid and what we're seeing out there and the amount of days over 90 degrees, it wasn't like this. Mm-hmm. And it's only going to be getting worse if we don't really act now to change it. But they want to pull back the endangerment finding, which basically means EPA would no longer have the authority to regulate greenhouse gases. Now, how that affects Philadelphia in particular is that includes having standards on emissions from vehicles. And you have a lot of vehicle traffic there.
Yeah.
That doesn't just impact the greenhouse gas emissions. There are all these what we call the co-pollutants, right? So if you do things that lower greenhouse gas emissions by, let's say, improving fuel efficiency, you're also going to be getting a lot less in the way of emissions of other toxic air pollutants that hurt people's health. So if those rules fall away on a federal level, I'm concerned about what that's going to mean in a lot of urban areas.
Yeah.
I mean, just even aside from climate change, which, I mean, all the predictions for Pennsylvania, Philadelphia is the area that's going to be hit the hardest. Mm-hmm. But even putting all of that aside, just on the base air quality, what people walking around the city are going to be breathing in and day out from vehicular emissions, that's going to be felt. And that's not something that can really be regulated on a local level, because there really has to be nationwide standards for the manufacturers. Mm-hmm. But again,
and when you say, when you mentioned that they will be going away with it, right? So who would just for the sake of conversation, I'm not sure if you know the answer to the question, but who would be now regulating it if the EPA is no longer regulating what is clean air and what is not clean air?
Well, it's not so much that whether they're regulating what's clean air versus not clean air, but it's specifically they won't be doing regulations if this is allowed to go through and if it's allowed to stand.
So it just will be whatever it is.
Regulations on greenhouse gases, specifically from vehicle emissions. Mm-hmm. And that's something that can't really be regulated on a local level. Mm-hmm. So it's a big problem. But the thing is, there are ways for people to fight this. I mean, the public comment period, that's when on a regulation, the public can weigh in directly to EPA. That's already closed, although there were a lot of comments submitted. There will likely be litigation about this brought by the environmental nonprofits and other advocacy groups, community health advocacy groups. But there's still things that people can do. It's important that your legislators, that they hear from you, that they know you care about this. You care about all these rollbacks on environmental protections that are going to be affecting your health. They need to hear from you and know that they have a mandate from the people to fight for you on this.
Yeah. And we got like maybe 4 minutes left. So I kind of want to cram in 2 quick questions. And I also want to get into the resources that we talked about too offline that you came to share. I wanted to just ask you, because we talked a little bit about how when it comes down to pollution, noise is actually a part of that, right? I don't want to get too in depth in that, but I just want to get your take on that, because a lot of people don't understand how noise is also affecting and polluting the air at the same time and causing a lot of different mental health stress on people, causing a lot of anxiety on people, but then also just causing people to just not feel comfortable in their own neighborhoods because of the sounds that are coming from these industries around them.
Yeah, I don't know if I consider noise an air pollution per se. It's sort of its own thing. It's noise pollution. Yeah. And it absolutely affects people. It, as you said, it affects mental health. It affects the animals in the area. It can totally change what it's like to live somewhere, and for some people make it unbearable. And, as we talked about, these data centers that are popping up, there could be noise pollution from those and from other facilities. And one way that people can try to work to address that is that even within communities, there could be local ordinances that address noise pollution and put up limits on how much noise pollution can be generated by certain facilities. However, there are some bills in the Pennsylvania legislature right now that would limit communities' abilities to protect themselves from any kind of impacts from data centers. And I guess we don't really have time to get into that right now, but I could send you some information you could share with your listeners at another point.
That'd be lovely. And we can always invite you back, right, Annie?
that would be great. Yes, to tell you more about these, because right now there are 3 bills that are really important that people need to be letting their legislatures know they don't want these. Mm-hmm.
And then my next question I want to ask you really quickly, is when it comes down to the state of Pennsylvania in general, when it comes down to combating some of the things at a state level, how can people get involved in a state level, to push back against some of these plans to actually bring data centers to the state of Pennsylvania?
Well, one thing is...
And one of the reasons why I'm asking this is because I know rural farmers are afraid right now. Like, they're afraid for their land. They're afraid for their crop. Like, so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring that up.
Well, first is to know you can have an impact. Don't give up and think that there's this wave, this tidal wave that you can't stop, because people getting together can stop. Second, you watch for the legislation, like the bills I was just telling you about. You look for what permits are being proposed for individual facilities, and you get out there and you make your voices heard. And even things like looking at, the state budget is out right now for approval, and follow what's happening there, educate yourselves on that, and speak up every step of the way. Find out where those opportunities are and speak up. And just to quickly, one resource, if you go to cleanair.org, Clean Air Council, you can sign up for action alerts.
Awesome.
And so for some of these things, we try not to flood people's inboxes, even with everything going on right now. But for some of these things, we're going to be letting you know. We're going to have information on our website, and just let people know when there's an opportunity that they shouldn't pass up to be heard and to stand up for your health.
Understood. Thank you so much, Annie. And also, if you did have any more resources, I would definitely like to take the time now to let the people know.
Well, there are resources. We actually, for permits that are coming up in the Philadelphia and Delaware County areas, we have pollutiontracker.cleanair.org. And then there are also places where city legislation is being posted, and I can't read out a whole URL right now. But maybe there's a website that you could post it to.
Yeah, if you let me know, if you send it to me, I can definitely share with the audience. And
you want to also look at zoning hearings, because sometimes if they're changing zoning, that could be very impactful.
Yes, I agree.
But definitely go to cleanair.org, sign up for our action alerts, because that will be helpful, and look at that pollution tracker. Because that's a good starting point for starting to find out about what some of these things are that are going to be impacting your communities very directly.
Yeah, and as we already know what's going down in the state of Texas with zoning, we want to make sure here in Pennsylvania we are on it so we don't get lost, for sure. I appreciate you, Annie. Go ahead. I don't mean to cut you off.
I just want to give two bill numbers for you for your readers to look up if you're concerned about the data centers.
Please.
SB 939, which would waive some requirements that are otherwise law for facilities. It would waive them for data centers. And SB 991, which would fast track the permitting process for data centers. So yes, you want to just look those up, or I could come back and tell you more about them if you want.
Yes, for sure. And one more time, SB.
There's SB. There's SB 991.
991 and
SB 939.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I actually just wrote them down. I'm going to look them up myself. Thank you so much, Annie, for the work that you're doing. Thank you for joining us here at ecoWURD, and I definitely look forward to having you back. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for the work you're doing.
Yes.
And you have a lovely day.
You too. Have a great weekend.
You're listening to The Week on Word.
Hi, I'm comedian Lunell, the original bad girl of comedy, and you're listening to WURD Radio.
WURD has always been a platform for Black people in Philadelphia.
We are giving voice to the community, and without the community, there will be no WURD. We are one and the same, and it is not a game. WURD.
Progressive Black Talk Media.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Week on Word. Let's stay connected. Sign up for our newsletter and listen to us online at wordradio.com and the WURD Radio app.